Hi, pals. So this is part 2 of this year's look at adaptations of A Christmas Carol. If you haven't seen the other 7 from this year, check out part 1 by clicking the link somewhere here, whatever corner it's in, or of course, in the description below. Now, this one is solely dedicated to the 2019 TV special. It was 3 hours. There's a lot to talk about. So since part 1 is already so long, it needed to go in its own standalone one. This one is advertised as a gothic interpretation by some and a dark fantasy one by others. So that had me excited because we're bringing in the spook factor. Each part was split into chapters. They totally missed the opportunity to call them staves, like they were in the original text. I know it's a little nitpicky, but it can't be changed now. Oh, it would have been a fun little nod to the source material, though. Can't deny that. Because of the extremely long run time, I was also ecstatic. Because I figured I'd get to see a bunch of details that are pretty much excluded from that, every adaptation, right? You'd have time to include all of it and have a bit of time for extra character and or plot exploration. Unfortunately, this did not happen. The extra exploration, yes. The seeing of parts that are typically cut, not so much. They also added a bunch of shit, and we see some of Marley's journey through what I call the Conic Plane. Just a quick note before I get into things further. This was done with a very dark, muted tone, mostly with an icy blue filter, which it fits this adaptation, it fits the vibe, but it made some shots quite dark and difficult to see some things. So there are times I might adjust the brightness on some stills and clips so you can see what I'm talking about. This particular image makes sense because it's a body in a buried coffin, but for what I'm doing, it's tougher to show stuff, right? Other times it makes sense because of the whole spook thing and other factors, but I'll still play around with that just when I feel it's necessary. Hopefully that won't be too much. So anyways, it's 1843 and it's Christmas Eve. It's been a whole year since Marley died, and some kid is literally doing what pretty much every blue-collar worker, especially the miners in the 80s, want to do to Thatcher's grave. At least if they haven't already. And no, I don't mean dance. The weird thing with this is we see Marley in the grave with the pennies on his eyes, and he's getting pissed because, the piss on his face. I will admit I was a little surprised at how well preserved the body looked because, this ain't how a body that's exactly a year dead should look in England in the 1840s, right? To quote a friend who knows about the subject, he should be goopy. So clearly, we are seeing him as a spirit from the start. But it would have been awesome for the spook factor if he looks a little decayed, even just a little desiccated. Just saying. It would have been, the spook. There is so much that happens in this one. I don't know where to start. Let's start with Scrooge himself. So he is very precise and particular, which, they're not bad things inherently. They make sense when you're in a financial profession. You want things to be accurate. Even outside of financial profession, you want accuracy. But anyways, In chapter 1, The Human Beast, we see him counting the lumps of coal that Bob can use for the date on Christmas Eve. And he gives him an extra one. But he gets some residue on his sleeve, so he has to change it, and he blames it on the extra lump of coal. Now you may be thinking, wait. He showed generosity? But what? That doesn't fit his character. And normally, yeah, I'd agree with you. However, it actually does fit because he sees that extra lump of coal as a trade-off for Bob not leaving work early that day as he had originally promised. So it was well, no, of course you can't leave early. I gave you coal instead. You need to stay. I guess it's, his version of a pizza lunch at work or something. So if he ever does something that some people would view as kind from him, wait for the other shoe to drop. Okay, because there's no such thing as a free kindness from that man. He's a very hard taskmaster. He assumes that Bob's good performance at his job is to spite him in hopes he could leave early. Not because Bob was good at his job, not because he takes pride in his work, but he just wanted to spite him. And his reward, guess what? I bet if you have ever worked in an office, especially at like an entry-level position, I bet you can guess what he was rewarded with. If you guess more work, congrats, you're right. I'm sure many people won't understand this. Like, seriously, take all the shady managers you've ever had, roll them into one, you got Scrooge, but somehow worse. But back to him being precise and particular. At first I thought this one was one where his apartment was over the office or something. Cause like, he had like a cupboard or a wardrobe or something. I'm pretty sure it was a cupboard with clean shirts in it. And I don't mean just one in case, but he has like multiple shirts at the office. You work in finance, you're not doing hard labor, you work in an office. Do you really need that many shirts at work? Not really. But okay, whatever floats your boat. But at the same time, and I mean, you can't diagnose people through a video, but in this version, he might legit have OCD, like, one little thing on my shirt, I must change now. Or he might have a different form of like neurospiciness going on. I don't know. Like, there's the shirt thing, but it's not the only thing. There's a bit during the workday, and we see him taking note of every single little noise in the street, from shouting to carts passing, and he marks down the time. And this has been going on for a while. Like, it looks like he has it doesn't look like he has a ledger dedicated to it. But again, I don't know how long it's been going on for. It could have started after Marley died, and like in that case it was like maybe a grief response and he's not acknowledging it. I don't know. But like he also kept talking to Marley's desk, which doesn't look like it had been touched much since his death beyond dusting. Like, so it could be stuff that he would have talked to Marley about. Again, I don't know. But like maybe he's, all that, like I totally get that, like being overstimulated by all that outside noise, or like you're stuck in something and then like, the back alley opera starts. And it's like, Stella! And you're just like, oh my god, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to do work. Like, I can understand that. Some people try to overcompensate for their size by, playing their bass too loud, in their cars passing by. Anyways, some people have trouble identifying emotions in others. And, when that happens, sometimes they have an easier time connecting to animals. And, like, it seems like that in this one, with most people, at least until the ghosts get through to him. And we'll talk about his dealings with animals later. Don't worry, it's nothing gross. He knows the exact years of the 2 pennies that he put on Marley's eyes for burial, which again, we'll get into that later. Like, there's just so many little things throughout that make me wonder, like, whether he's intentionally supposed to be coded like that in this or not. I do wonder if that's part of it. And like, now, separate from that, he does some really atrocious things beyond anything we see in the book, which makes this possibility really suck, because associating those things with neurospicy brains is just, it's not the representation that anybody really wants. But with so many things throughout, it does look like that's a possibility. True to book Scrooge, he is still miserly and a grump. We see so many examples of that, some of which happen with Marley and past, so we'll touch on those later. But as far as stuff from the book that would totally, or the things that would totally fit in there, words, he refuses to give the Ragged Bone Man anything. He gets pissy with the carolers. He's skeptical of Marley. He says no to Fred's invite to dinner. Thinks Christmas is dumb. Won't donate to the men, who, funnily enough, ask him if he even has 2 pennies to spare, which he does have exactly 2 pennies on him. But, those prisons and workhouse, they should be good enough for the poor. A quick look at Bob and his family. Bob feels like the beleaguered employee, struggling to get by, and Mary, who is Mrs. Cratchit here, she still hates Scrooge with every fiber of her being. They don't have a bunch of kids in this one. They just have 2. Just 2. Belinda, and of course, Tiny Tim, who is actually, like, tiny. He's 7 years old, he has dwarfism, but he also wants to play like all the other kids. However, because of other health complications, he can't just go out and do all the things that the other kids do. And also because of those health implications, he needed to have an expensive surgery when he was really young. I think he was 2. The timing of it will be cleared up when I get to another part of this. But I'm having a brain lapse on the specific number right now, and I don't feel like going back in my notes right this second. So, these are the days before the NHS. So, nothing to do with healthcare was covered by the government. So, since they were poor, they were fucked. Except for an American cousin of Mary's. They sent them money for Tim's surgery, so they weren't fucked. And Tim writes the cousin every year at Christmas time with a thank you letter, and it's so cute. It's really sweet. But the cousin never replies, so, Bob is getting suspicious of where the money really came from. So maybe Mary was actually fucked because she gets really cagey anytime Bob brings up the fact, where did the money come from? I want to know, what's going on with this cousin? Why, I'm gonna move on from Bob and Co. because I'll be getting more into their stuff when I talk about ghosts. But man, what a dark take. At least I warned you all that this one is a dark take on the story. Let me tell you, things stay pretty dark throughout. So I guess now is where I'll say, if you don't want to get into subjects like abuse, assault, and mass death, then after the Marley section, you should skip to another bit. Although there is a brief thing that comes up in the Marley section, so I don't know. Because, reading the story and seeing some of the adaptations, it's most likely, if they don't mention or explicitly show it, that Scrooge's father was probably abusive to him as a kid. And the book doesn't say it outright again, but, definitely alludes to that. This adaptation gets into these topics and not by alluding to things. So if you don't have the spoons for that stuff today, I'll put the time code of where you should skip to before I really dive into that stuff. I haven't reached that point yet, but just heads up to the heads up. I don't know. On to the ghosts. I'm going to start with Marley and his haunting, not just because he's the first ghost we see, but also because we get time with him before he visits Scrooge and throughout, both with and without his former business partner. It's kind of like in the 2000 version where he keeps cropping up, but also not because of all the time we see him in the plane and not with Scrooge. It's different. So like I said before, he's getting pissed because he's literally getting pissed on. All he wants is a quiet afterlife, and most importantly, he wants to make amends. This sets off the bell in purgatory, and we get to see the maker of his chains. Turns out, the maker of his chains used to work at one of the factories that Marley and Scrooge owned, and Marley is given all of his chains, and they have been made specially for him. Then he's in this forest, and he's being dragged by an empty carriage, and I think it's still purgatory, but I don't know. This is why I'm just... most of the time I'll say chronic play. But then he gets released or something. It was kind of hard to tell. But he lands in a bunch of toys. So there's this forest. But he comes across all these toys in the forest, and then he finds one of his own toys from when he was a kid. But then he sees this bonfire, and he heads towards that, and there's somebody at the fire, and then they leave and they come back, and they come back with Marley's old toy. And he throws it. This person just throws everything onto the fire. This is our introduction to Christmas past. Who is not a young person with flowers and the hope of the past, the hope of youth, buried beneath some sarcasm? No. This is past. He is shown to us as a decrepit old man with a thorny crown. I guess they're trying to combine elements of past and present with a more spiky, thorny species of holly plant, and maybe, I really hope not, some allusions to Christ? I don't know. He does have some shape-shifting qualities that we see during this section. We'll get more into that stuff later because we're talking about Marley here, but this is what past looks like. Now in the book, there's a line of Marley's. "That is no light part of my penance," pursued the ghost. "I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer." In the book, I've always thought that Marley's fate is sealed, right? He's giving his friend a chance to not be screwed over in his afterlife, and he made the arrangements. But I guess there's another way of looking at that. There's another interpretation, that he could procure the same fate as Scrooge if he changes. And the writers of this version take that idea and run like hellhounds after it. Past gives Marley the terms of his redemption. Scrooge has to change into a better human being since they committed their most egregious acts together. If he and the other two ghosts don't believe he's made the changes at the end of their times with him, both Scrooge and Marley are damned for all eternity, meaning Marley is going to be thrown into the bonfire just as the toys were. Marley's so cool. Fuck. That's never gonna happen. But now we get to the haunting. It starts early. First 2 coins fell down from the chimney at Scrooge's office. The very 2 coins that he put on Marley's eyes at the day of his funeral, which is why there are 2 pennies that suddenly have the exact years of the coins that Scrooge used. There's a lot of focus put on Marley's desk before Scrooge goes home for the day. I thought the scarf on the chair was going to move or something. No. His planner was closed and then it opens and "Prepare ye" is scrawled on the page. It was kind of chilling the way it happened. Me describing it cannot convey how chilling it kind of was. It's just, Also, the smith that made Marley's chains was seen briefly. It was so good. Scrooge is perturbed by all this to the point that it bleeds through his stony mask, and Bob, asks him if he's okay, which I doubt Bob has ever done in the 10 years that he ever worked for him. But because of this stuff with Marley's things, and either a vision or a memory of a violent nightmare, not sure which, he is so out of sorts, he ends up sending Bob home early, which, awesome for Bob. He wishes that it's already 4 o'clock and that he could just go home. If weird things are happening at your office, I'm sure you want to get out of there, and fast. So he's standing there, he's playing with his pocket watch, and suddenly it's actually 4 p.m. when he's done playing with it. He doesn't take 30 minutes to play with it, but it was as if his watch controlled the time of the world around him, and so it was actually 4 o'clock. And I don't know if this was an editorial thing and time actually passed normally, but it seemed like it went with his speeding up, or speeding up his watch, or if that was the ghost doing something special. But it was cool either way. It really looked neat. I do think the men looking for donations was a test for Scrooge. He's already got the 2 pennies from Marley's coffin, and they literally do say,
"All we're asking for, sir, are a couple of penny coins. Do you not have 2 penny coins in your pocket?"
How the fuck did they know? Maybe it was Past shape-shifted as one of them. Maybe it was some otherworldly spirit. Possibly Marley put that in their head. Maybe it was just coincidence. I don't know, but I'm sure it was a preliminary test that somebody set up to see if there was even a chance of his redemption. Because they actually do test him to see if he's worth spending time on. As he gets home, Scrooge sees this. And it looks hella familiar, because it's the same one that Marley was dragged behind earlier. And we know that because of the writing on the side. Scrooge feels bad for the horses and puts the only blanket that there is on one of them, because I guess if there were 2 blankets, he probably would have put one on each. But yeah, this was enough. And the ghosts are like, all right, time for the plan. And Marley admits this to him, once he's there, right? If Scrooge didn't help the horse, then there would be no hope for either of them. And now Marley has a glimmer of hope. But I love this haunting. We get the door knocker with the added bonus of the ghostly jaw falling off, and Scrooge, he gets all the spooky feels. He tries to look up, but not everything locks, and then there are unknown footsteps and figures in the background, and the pièce de résistance. A jaw is suddenly on Scrooge's floor. This is the type of thing I'm talking about when I say that earlier adaptations are gonna have a harder time with Marley's haunting. Because, it's insanely difficult to pull something like this off with earlier tech. But Marley just picks up his jaw off the floor, and then he just reattaches it so he can talk. It was so fucking good! I did find a bit of dark humor in that little bit where he's just like, oh, that's better, The key thing with it is that it wasn't a gag. It was just, and it didn't detract from the severity of the scene. Simply put, Scrooge took Marley's jaw off by accident when he was the door knocker, and it needed to be reattached. That's all. It wasn't done as a gag. It was practical, not for not for humorous effect, certain adaptations did. That's right, Disney, I'm looking at you. I loved your 091, but that's one thing I didn't like, especially after your amazing build-up for that scene. Another great part of the scene is that even after all that's happened, Scrooge still holds on to, like, even after seeing the jaw, he holds on to his skepticism of what he just saw. He's just like, oh, I didn't really eat today, so, I'm hungry. Oh, I must be dreaming. Like, he's trying to logic it away. And like even after Marley seems to have convinced him and has given the warning, Scrooge pulls out the line from the book about like, uncooked beef, undigested potato, that type of thing. I just noticed how washed out this is. It's after 4 p.m. I recorded this later than I meant to, like later in the month than I meant to. So, it's getting darker earlier and it's after 4 and that caused weird lighting. So, if for any of the previous bit I was washed out, that's why. But it's at the point where I know I have to have other lights on no matter what I do. Because normally when I try to do other lights, it gets all weird and messed up. Let's get started onto the stuff where if you didn't want to check it out, that's fine. Because it takes a lot of spoons. During Scrooge's alright, convince me then phase, Marley makes him walk into the other room, and he is transported to another place in time. In this place, there is a factory, and the resulting debris that landed in the streets, all on fire. There are injured and burned people in the streets as others try to put the fire out. It's one that they owned. It's actually where the smith that made Marley's chains worked. He and many others died in that fire. It made me think of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. But there's a big difference between that one and Scrooge and Marley's, though. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, that forced some safety regulations to be made, right? With this, the pair got off scot-free from any charges in the resulting inquest. Why? Because they bribed the officials that were involved and they heavily blamed the victims. So we close out the first chapter with Marley's main haunting finishing and Scrooge pretty much just preparing to defend himself from any spirits that may want to bother him. And then we start chapter 2, The Human Heart, with Marley back in the chthonic plane feeling defeated, and Pastor's just like, here, hold my mulled wine. What? It's Christmas. It's set in the Victorian era. Gotta throw some theme stuff in here and there. I already mentioned what Past looked like in his natural form. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was a little like creep, spook, whatever. But you know what would have made it even spookier? If Past had been doing everything we've seen so far, tossing in like toys into the fire, stuff like that, plus what's to come. But if the natural form had been a kid, and I do mean an older child, I don't mean like a 5-year-old, one that we could have a more meaningful discussion about some of the subject matter that's coming up. For something that was being aired on TV, I doubt it would have gone past the censors if they were 5, because this was partially done by BBC, so like you kind of have to think about that. But, somebody in their preteen, maybe early teen years, maybe, young Scrooge's age when we see him at school. Because, think about it. Creepy old man being domineering, yelling, chuckling at points. A somewhat cheerful, yet scoffing preteen throughout what Scrooge has shown. Kids are horror movie tropes for a reason. And, okay, this isn't a horror movie, but, when you're trying to go for, a little spook, sometimes, kids are creepier than adults with this kind of thing. Just saying, Children of the Corn, hello. When we first see Lilith in Supernatural, hello, creepy as fuck. It would have fit with Past. The innocence of a child, the horrors of a child's and adult's world, which is, what we get into with the first thing that Past really brings up with him. We see Scrooge's compassion with animals. We've already seen that. But, then there's the pet, or at least mostly compassion. Because, there's the pet mouse that his sister gave him for Christmas when they were young. And, and I do say mostly because when he realizes why he's seeing his old friend as a ploy to melt his heart, this happens. Yep, he threw that little guy out the window like it was a cheesy campfire song at Camp Tiki Hama. Scrooge's intro to Past is more messed up than Marley's. I mean, he takes on the form of Scrooge's abusive father, who loved to sing Molly Malone, the song that he's singing when he leaves Marley, and what I'm assuming is part of Purgatory, but again, chthonic planes. Okay. His father imparted other things onto him, core memories like killing Erasmus, and part of the fucked up philosophy that he still lives by every day. We get to something else he did to Scrooge in his school days, though, and that's actually sending him to school. You'd think getting away from this man would be good for him, but no, it was not. The whole thing kind of threw me for a loop, because, like, it started out how it did in the book, pretty much. Like, the kids he went to school with, they're, like, having solo fights, having fun as they're leaving school, like, yay! They even make a bit of a jab at something he said earlier, like, not the usual stuff, but in his diatribe against Christmas, he tells Bob that it's ridiculous to think of camels at Christmas time. Like, whoever heard of camels walking through the snow? But Past shape shifts into his favorite book characters, Alibaba, and he conjures up a camel, which is his name is Valentine, and he makes Scrooge ride the camel up to the school. So we have a camel being ridden through the snow. I thought that was a fun little moment to close a loop that they had introduced. They really lean into the whole Alibaba thing with using Open Sesame as a way to get into the building, and we see something that comes up later about those in the spirit realm and those traveling with them the way that Scrooge is. Children and those experiencing heightened emotions can make you more attuned to the spirit world, and so they can see that side of the veil easier. So Past shows himself as Alibaba, and the cool thing is that adult Scrooge kind of remembers it. So time isn't linear in this, it's wibbly wobbly. It was actually a really nice moment and a cool interpretation of the original text. But then, we see the first shades of him not liking school when we first see his schoolmaster. He hates that man so much. It was like the fire of 1,000 suns. He tries to attack him, which I mean doesn't really work because they're spirits in the veil visiting the past, and but the schoolmaster interrupts Past in his Alibaba form, and the illusion disappears, and that's when we figure out just why Scrooge hates him. See, like, the stereotype is schoolmasters and mistresses of the Victorian era just weren't exactly known for their kindness. So at first I was like, oh, he's a douchey head of school. Most kids would love to get back at him. However, he says that Scrooge should stay in his rooms, as apparently has happened before. And then we hear the carriage outside, and there's this fleeting part.
Who is it?
Did you clock the look that Scrooge gives? Did you clock the look that young Scrooge gives when the schoolmat, like, and then his sister comes and picks him up. And, like, she is very different from the book. Book sis has typical, like, Victorian period feels to her, like, yay! This sis gets her brother out of the room when the schoolmaster tries to stop him from leaving, and then when Scrooge is out of the room, she literally pulls a gun on him and confirms to the audience that their father pimped him out so he didn't have to pay the school fees and to get him out of the house. One less mouth to feed, I guess. They also tweak another thing with the dad. Instead of him being a better man, he's just gone. We don't know if their mom did the insanely brave thing, especially in that day and age, and left him, or if something else happened to him and he just disappeared, never to be seen again. The IMDb page says that the dad's name is Franklin, but maybe his middle name was Earl, if you catch my drift. We just don't know. I mean, all we know is that he's gone, and Scrooge's sister gave him a sugar-coated explanation. Right, like, that's all we know. There was a glimmer of the Belle plotline, and bringing the light aspect of Past back into things, even though Fezziwig's party is cut. What the fuck? The fuck? Instead of it being a zoetrope, his hat is now a projector. And side note, at this point in history, slideshows were a thing. The magic lantern had been around for well over 100 years at this point in time. I mean, this picture is from a publication in 1721, as these devices had been used for a while before that. However, in the 1840s, they couldn't project videos since, the video hadn't been invented yet. Instead of showing what happened to Scrooge's youthful love, he was shown what could have been. 2 kids with his best girl by his side. But that's all we get. I mean, cool the way they showed it. Kinda disappointed that that's all we got. Although the names for the kids are sweet, you know? Jacob and Lottie. For the rest of the time we have with past, everything is pure addition to the text. Things that were never written or even conceived of by Dickens. First we get to a mine that Scrooge and Marley owned. We see Scrooge's compassion for animals again, as he's concerned about the pit ponies. But when the mine starts collapsing, he doesn't really show the same care for the miners. Why did the mine collapse on that fateful Christmas Eve? Because Scrooge and Marley cut funding for the simple safety measures that were in place. Many people either died or were severely injured. And if you remember that earlier at the office, there was that vision or nightmare thing. This is what that was of, right? The horrific deaths and injuries of all those people. I've seen the same thing happen with the factory fire that we saw earlier. You know, it's on brand, cut safety measures. Who cares about the workers? Then there's a cotton mill that Scrooge and Marley bought for pennies on the dollar. This part also adds to my wondering for the potential Nero-Spicy link for Scrooge, because he remembers every single annual P&L from the last 10 years that Past asks him about. That's impressive. I mean, most people can't do that. The scene is also kind of cool because, like, during the point where they're talking about his profits over the last few years, we get this visual happening at the same time. It was clever. I mean, they were so profitable that they weren't printing money. No. They were weaving it. The next bit of past is split between Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, A Bag of Gravel, because apparently we needed more than 1 hour with past having screen time dedicated to his part. So 5 years ago, Tim had fluid on the lungs, which requires surgery that costs around £30. According to the internet, that's the equivalent of just over $7,500 Canadian in today's money. This is the money that Mary borrowed from her American cousin that was brought up earlier. She went to Scrooge for the loan, but the terms they weren't favorable in his eyes, but he's willing to make a deal with her because he's viewing her as some sort of social experiment to see how far someone is willing to go for what they want. So she takes the deal and she goes to his place to do whatever he asks. He never actually says what he wants when she's there. She just assumes, like I did, that, sex was the cost, and she starts undressing. She gets almost completely undressed when he stops her. But he does stop her. I don't know if that was meant to seem redeeming or not, but it really doesn't. Because remember, this is all a social experiment to him. She's a good, God-fearing woman. How far is a woman like that willing to go for what's important to her? She gets dressed, she takes money, but not before she says that he won't tell Bob what happened, so long as she makes sure he doesn't leave Scrooge's employ. Otherwise, the tea will be spilled. The interesting thing with this scene is that Scrooge has realized how badly he fucked up with all of this, and he doesn't want to see this play out again. He tells Past that he wants to leave, and I think he's finally seeing how he's repeating his father's mistakes, just in a different way. But then when talking to Past, he tries to logic away what he did. It's like, well, actually, it's a good thing, because, she got the money, and it saved her son's life, and he's still alive. Like, oh, it was a good thing. Dude, it wasn't out-and-out sex, but it was still sexploitation, and you were being a horrible creep, just like your schoolmaster was to you. So before she leaves, Mary has lied about how some form of justice would make him take a look at himself, and that she had the power to do so. And, Scrooge is all like, wait. Hey, Past, did Mary send you? I don't, what? Okay, we're finally done with Past. At this point, Marley is even more dejected than before, and then we see Present in a cloak, and Marley knows exactly who it is. It's Scrooge's sister. In this version, her name is Lottie. Now, is Lottie, Charlotte, Lottie, whatever, a period-accurate name? Yes, it is. But so is Fan, which is her name in the book. I know it's a little detail, I know it's nitpicky, but I don't get why they changed her name. If this were a modernization, yeah, sure, set in a different culture or country, okay, I get it. People just aren't named Fan or Fanny anymore, and Francis isn't used as a girl's name as much anymore. You mostly only hear it with boys' names nowadays. But in the Victorian era, it was used for girls. Why are you changing the name? I give the smallest passes to Belle being called Elizabeth in this. According to the internet, Belle is a nickname, albeit uncommon, for Elizabeth. So, smallest pass, but even that still kind of irks me. Something that would have been a nice touch is if Lottie were wearing green. She's wearing like a slightly reddish brown cloak. But it would have been great if she were wearing a nice green one, like extra points if it was Shield's green. I mean, okay, it was pretty much banned by the 1840s on the continent since it was harmful and was making people sick. But as far as I can tell, England still had some places churning out fabric and wallpaper in that color, as did America. So it would have worked because, she's a ghost, so it's not like it's gonna hurt her or anybody that can see her, and, it would have been green, like President's robe in the book. It didn't have to be Shield's green, but like it could have been any green, but it would have been a nice touch. However, I guess she would have been too smart to still use it when she was alive because she says that, she was scientifically minded, just not in a twisted way like Scrooge. So she decides that she's going to show him science, and each group she shows him is presented as a case study. So that's kind of cool, and like it kind of fit with how her character was presented. And I'll get to those in a minute, because we do see the Cratchit family on Christmas, and we see the surviving miners. But you know who we don't see after he's first introduced? Fred. We don't go and see her son at his Christmas party. Why don't we go there? It would have been great. Like, it could have driven something, like, some things home. But, like, no, we kind of have that. Like, why would we do that? I don't know. Like, I mean, we have the interaction between Scrooge and Fred at the beginning. So, like, Scrooge is invited to the party, but in a departure from the book, this is the last time that he's going to do that. Like, Fred doesn't have so much of a happy demeanor and doesn't care what his mother told him before she died about, like, being there for Scrooge and all that. Like, he's just going to give up on him if he doesn't come this time. I wanted to see Fred's party. Anyways, that's what we did see. With Bob and Mary, she wants to come clean to Bob about what happened when Tim was sick, but right before she tells him, she sees Scrooge. So remember, he's in like spirit form right now because he's traveling with the spirits, and people experiencing heightened emotions can sometimes see spirits. And Mary said earlier that she could summon justice onto Scrooge, so she can briefly see him. So this causes her to lie about what happened, but Bob is glad to know what he thinks is the truth now, and everything seems to be okay with them until he announces to the family that he has a better prospect and is going to quit working for Scrooge. Yeah, great. Could this be a parallel for Bob getting Peter a job since Peter is child not appearing in this film? Maybe. I don't know. But, if that is the case, cool. Unless you're married. Because, she just lied about the money again. And part of the terms of her taking that money, remember, was to make sure that Bob didn't quit. So, the tea is going to be spilled, and I don't think Bob will believe her if she told him that nothing actually happened between her and Scrooge, not after being lied to twice about it already. I mean, that would stretch credulity. Case study 2 is at the church, where the miners go for a memorial to honor those that they lost in the collapse. Scrooge expects there to be anger, but there isn't really any, except for one person. It is a coping mechanism, don't you worry. He pisses it out onto Marley's grave, because it's the guy from the beginning that we see doing just that. If we jumped ahead from way back, welcome back. Some things will be briefly mentioned but not spoken about in detail. And it's a Christmas Carol. We already know that there's a part about Tim's death, so I don't really need to tiptoe around that shit. So future. He's dressed as a Victorian undertaker. His mouth is stitched closed so he can't speak. It's an interesting design concept. However, the fact that we now know that his mouth is stitched shut means we can see his face. And just, by now we know how I feel about this. So I'm not getting into that again. So insert that right here and we'll move on. Actually, we won't move on quite yet, because beyond pointing, Future doesn't do anything to communicate with Scrooge at all. Like, so beyond look over there, dumbass, there's nothing deeper than that. It's simply just look, watch, no hints, no nothing. Just in this, he touches Scrooge's heart and head at different points too. From what I can tell, give him messages. It's not telepathically. I mean more to say, look inside yourself. Use your low fidget. Like that bothered me so much. There isn't supposed to be meaningful communication between them. You don't really know what's going on. That's the point of the future. It's unknown. Does his intro have spooky factor? Hells yes it does, which that was awesome. There was a bit more weirdness though. We start with the present Christmas. Like, did Future forget what his writ was? Because like past stuck with the past, present stuck with the present. You know, we should only be seeing the future, right? Like, which I mean, his intro is in the miners' church, but it's old and falling apart. Like, we're in the future when we first meet him. But no, we go to the present time because Bob is writing his resignation letter when Belinda runs into the office because there's been an accident. Tim, who wanted to skate earlier on, took Belinda's skates and goes on ice falling through. Like, this is how Tim dies in this. Just trying to have fun, like a regular kid. And then when they're at Scrooge's grave, which is beside Marley's, and yes, the miner guy comes and pisses on his grave now as well, Future disappears and Marley shows up. I mean, Scrooge pretty much tells him, sorry, dude, but I think we deserve the torment. Like, I just want him to live. That's all that matters. And this must have been enough for the spirits, because Marley's back in his grave, and he seems to be at peace now. But Scrooge isn't home yet. He's still at the graveyard, only his and Tim's graves are gone, because it's 1843 again, not 1851. So there he is, running through the streets, in his housecoat, and he slips on the ice, and then comes to an epiphany. He spreads a bag of gravel on the pond so nobody can skate and fall through the ice that day. And he's gone a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puff. And instead of waiting until the next day, goes to Bob at home, gives his blessing on the new job because he's closing down the business anyway, and he's going to give him £500, which is about 140,000 Canadian dollars in today's money, according to the internet, and then goes on about the spirits, and he very specifically uses Mary's words from before. Tim kind of finds all this music, and he asks,
is this what happens when someone drinks laudanum?
Which is another full circle moment, stemming from an addition, because when he's trying to logic away seeing Marley, one of the things he says is that, oh, maybe my drink was spiked with laudanum from the cleaning lady. And like, I can see why Tim might think that. He looks a little mad, ranting and raving in a house coat, and like, I don't blame him for asking that. The last shot we see is Mary looking at the camera saying, spirits past, present, and future. There's still much to do. The fact that so much time was spent with past was actually kind of annoying. I mean, we didn't need all that time with him. Most of it was additional stuff that wasn't even in the book. I mean, even though we got the cool shots with the weaving from it, like the cotton mill stuff wasn't needed. We already knew he was a dick. They could have done the P&L stuff in relation to cutting safety measures at the mine. That would have fit, and we could have seen more of other stuff. They could have also not done the factory thing and had the Smith in Purgatory be one of the miners, or conversely, cut the mine and made the factory fire be the big thing. But I guess they wanted to tie in the whole caring for animals stuff with the pit ponies, so fine. Cut the factory and have the catastrophe stuff, everything with it be tied to the mine. But at day's end, we didn't need as many examples of douchebaggery as we got. We already knew how much of an asshole he was long before we hit the stuff with the mine. We didn't need all that. Like, I think present and future should have had a bit more screen time, and those parts would have gotten that if past had been more than a third of the whole thing. However, aside from Fred and the end, I think everything came around full circle. I can't think of any loose ends outside of Fred, because, like, we have no idea if he went to Fred's party or not. And then the last shot, I don't like the whole to be continued vibe. The story's wrapped up in a nice little bow. Scrooge changes. He helps out the Cratchits. He's like another father to Tiny Tim. There's nothing ambiguous about that. There's no, oh, to be continued bullshit. Like, but Penny, it's dark fantasy gothic. Those stories have proper endings. It is possible in those genres. Like, Dracula has a definitive ending. Frankenstein has a definitive ending. Why toss in that energy? Like, this isn't Alice in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass, where there's the literal question of, was it a dream or was it real life? Is asked at the end. At least in Looking Glass it is. And even then there's a definitive ending to both of those stories. I mean, okay. At least they didn't lose the base message of the story, don't be a dick. So that was nice. I appreciate that, but don't TBC that shit. Don't. Despite my criticisms, it was entertaining. And by that I meant it was captivating. Like, it wasn't like, ah, ha, 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 kind of entertaining. It was like, it captivates you. Like, and it held my attention. Like, the spooky that we got, yes. Yes. So, high up there on the entertainment scale, but lower marks on accuracy. However, most of the changes did make sense, including the full circle moments on some throwaway comments throughout. I can't quite put it in the as good category, but it's better than good, so this goes between them. It's worth a watch just to see how it's all done. Like, visually, this was amazing. Like, Self-plug time! You can become a member for $1 a month to see sneak peeks on things as I work on stuff. The link will be below, or you can do a one-off support on my page to help me out. My short story, The Order, is also available there, so you can check that out as well. As for my YouTube stuff, please subscribe and share, then comment down below. Hitting like will only help my channel to grow. And ring the bell so you'll always be one of the first to know. Then click the link to support the show. Support the show. Click the link to support the show. I don't know exactly when the next video will be. I have some crafty things that I'm trying to get done, but I don't have the facilities to make them happen right now. That may have to wait until the winter is over and I have windows that aren't frozen shut. Fumes. Not the fumes. But yeah, I have some ideas for stuff, and I'm taking it slow for my brain's own sake. Until next time, pals. Blessed be. Second video. If you haven't the stereotypes, schoolmistresses. It's the most nuggiest time of the year. Adult Fantasy's tab. Back to the video. Oh my god. Rewind. Identifying emotions in others. Emotions in others. Tactical massacre. Ain't never gonna get it. Into this tab. The window, the second story window. If you don't know, nursery rhyme will throw you out the window. That is a real campfire song that we sang when I was at camp as a kid